Amazing stuff. It takes biblical stories, prayers, I mean, and you would never think it would sound right, but it does.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thanks for accommodating the different space here. We are on page 22. We've been talking about the function of prayer in terms of creating divine connection. And essentially, prayer is a ladder where we contemplate the greatness of God within nature, and then that inspires the I would say the emotional side, but the animal side of us to appreciate the presence of God in the world. And as we continue to focus on the prayer, recognize presence of Hashem in our world, which ultimately is coming from the godly soul, the animal soul gets consumed in that passion, in that excitement, which makes it akin to animal sacrifice, right? Animal sacrifice, we take the physical animal and we put it on top of the altar, and it gets consumed in the fire of the animal sacrifice. Good morning.
Fire in a new place.
Thank you. It's been a couple of years. Nice to see you. As we mentioned, the prayer is in the place of animal sacrifice, and the common denominator of all sacrifices is the offering of the fats, representing pleasure, and the blood, which represents passion, to the service of God. And so prayer is designed in a similar function. Through the words of prayer, we inspire, we activate the godly soul, and that produces a fire that in turn consumes the animal soul. Doesn't mean it consumes it, it gets rid of it. It consumes it, becomes part of the passion and the excitement of the godly soul. And then the goal is that when prayer is over, we take that passion and that pleasure, and we use it in the service of God. But now we're going to climb the next ladder, the next step within prayer. And that's on page 22. The very bottom of the page, it says, V'zehu v'zois ha-mitzvah laseis ba'aretz, eretz zavas chalavu devash. And this is the commandment that God commanded to you to fulfill in the land, a land flowing with milk and honey. What is the commandment? That is the commandment of the recitation of the Shema. So we're gonna try to understand what is the relationship with the recitation of the Shema after we have a better understanding of what does it mean, a land of milk and honey, right? It's on a literal level, it represents to the physical abundance, but there's a spiritual meaning here. So first, let's understand what Shema is. Ki top of 23. Ki inyan parsha Shema Yisrael. What is the idea behind the passage of Shema Yisrael? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Shahavaya Seiv Kol Almin. Havaya, the Yud. So we're going to talk a little bit about God's names here. So we have many names for God, but the primary name of God is what's in Hasidic terminology, it's called Havaya. Havaya is a way that we are allowed to say God's name. You're familiar with those witnesses, right? The witnesses, if you change the J to a Y, it's the actual pronunciation of God's name, which is why we don't actually say the word even with a J, because it's an attempt to actually repeat the name of God, and we are careful not to say God's name unless in the context of prayer. And that pronunciation of God's name we don't say at all. It was said in the temple, but it's not something that we say any longer. It's too holy. So how could we refer specifically to the name of God? By saying Havaya. right? We say Havaya. Havaya is similar letters, but it's a different pronunciation. And Havaya also means to bring into being. And that is the name of God that actually brings everything into being. So the Shema says, Shema Yisrael Havaya. Elokeinu is another name of God. Elokeinu represents God as he is manifest. Elokeinu, Elokim, that represents God as he's manifest within our physical consciousness. So Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, Havaya. What is Havaya? Soiviv Kolaman. That is the higher manifestation of God that we've discussed in the past. That's the transcendent dimension of God that encompasses all the worlds. Shehu Elokeinu, he is Elokeinu. What is Elokeinu? Morning. What is Elokeinu? Elokeinu, as we mentioned, is God as he's present within our consciousness. And as we've been discussing in the discourse, Elokeinu is God as we don't have to believe in him, we know him. Havaya, the transcendent dimension of God, we have to believe in. So what is the Shema saying? That Shema Yisrael, you should know, Israel, that Havaya, the transcendent dimension of God, that is Elokeinu. It's the same God. And that God is manifest in the Elokeinu, that God is manifest in the dimension of God as he is found present within our consciousness. The dimension of God that we believe in a manner of faith alone. I don't mind if you close it. I just don't want people who are looking for the class not to find us. Maybe you can see if the other class, the kids are closed, then we'll reduce the noise. If not, close it halfway.
Maybe. For years, until recently, I was writing G-D, and I think I saw somewhere in Chabad G space D. Have you seen this? Is that, and I started doing it.
Yeah, I've seen that a little bit. I do it myself a little bit.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's kosher. The whole idea is that God's name in any language really contains holiness. And therefore, we want to be careful not to spell it out, G-O-D, because then it retains a certain level of holiness that is becomes problematic to erase it or discard it and so on. Yeah. So again, let's understand the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel. Havaya, the dimension of God that's transcendent. Elokeinu, that is the same God that is immanent. It's to say like this, that whatever consciousness we have of God and a relationship with God, as we've discussed in the discourse, we don't have to have faith for that. We have knowledge of that. What do I mean by knowledge? Like the Alter Rebbe says in the discourse, knowledge means that I feel it. You ask somebody, why do you believe in God? They don't have to have an answer for that. I just do, right? How do you know you're alive? Do you really need to answer that question? You need to answer how do I know I'm alive? I know I'm alive. If I wasn't alive, I guess I wouldn't know it. But I know I'm alive. You want proof of it? My heart is beating. My brain is functioning. But you have people whose brains aren't functioning and they're still alive. And you have people who have different, their hearts beat faster, they beat slower, they have a higher blood pressure, lower blood pressure. But the idea that I know that I'm alive is real to me. I don't have to have a reason for it. The fact that God is present, I know it. The fact that God is transcendent, I don't know that dimension of God. The Shema is telling us that that dimension of God that's transcendent is present in the immanent dimension of God. And the goal is to bring that transcendent dimension into a place of knowledge. And that's what the Shema continues. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that dimension is present in the Echad. What is Echad? Echad means one. And as I think we discussed this in an earlier discourse, that Echad, when we say God is one, and we don't say God is singular, what we intend to say is that in the fragmentation of our consciousness, it's all a manifestation of the same transcendent God. Right? It's not that there's two expressions of God. There's a immanent expression of God and a transcendent expression of God. God that's transcendent is present in the immanent. The fact that we don't see it is not a function of God, it's a function of us. If we were able to tweak the frequency, we'd be able to see the presence of the transcendent presence of God here as well. God is totally present. Nothing can ultimately hide on God. So the fact that we don't see God is a function of our inability to see that. Does this make sense? And the goal is that Hashem Echad, God, that dimension of God should be real for us, like Echad, like all the fragmentation. The Bechinas Das v'Hargasha, on a level of knowledge and feeling, we should feel it. Liyoy's bittul. 24. In a manner that we experience it, that there is only one reality as it's expressed in the higher unity, which I'll explain now. So there's two concepts of divine unity. There is divine unity as we see it from a human vantage point, and there's divine unity as it's seen from the divine vantage point. What's the difference? So if you're hanging out with God and you look down, I don't mean literally down, but where the concealment is, you would say there's only one true reality, and that true reality is God. And you would say everything else that thinks that it's real doesn't really get it. So it's yesh, God is the true something, and all the nothingness comes from God, comes from that true something. That's God's vantage point. What is our vantage point? Our vantage point is that we are something. Good morning. Our vantage point is that we are something in the sense that we are aware of our consciousness, and God is nothing. Not that God is nothing, God forbid that he's worthless, but God is nothing, meaning he's nothingness. We can't touch it, we can't tap it. We don't have a comprehension of it. So that's Yichud Tata, that's the lower unity. And that's, by the way, how we function. A person who's active with their soul functions in that capacity. There's me and my reality, and then there's God. Right? We say, what's real? What is real? Real is what we perceive. But is that really what's real? Just because we perceive a physical reality, does that make it real? The real reality is God, the transcendent dimension of God. So the function of the Shema is to move our consciousness, our knowledge of the immanent dimension of God into the transcendent dimension, to realize, to recognize that Havaya, that the transcendent dimension of God is Elokeinu. It's completely present here. The transcendent dimension of God is completely present in our reality. Does this make sense? Any questions?
Here's a little dumb question. Why does it split it out like that? Why is it like relative real gods that are present? What's the time from faith from shadow? I don't want to use the word because you know it's not just like you can't say everything to break it down and say, hey, what's the point of that?
Because when you say you know, what does it mean that you know? What does it mean that you know? Remember, we gave the passage from the Talmud, the thief is standing by the entrance of the house he's about to go in, and he turns to God and he says, God, please help me be successful. Right? So it's a passage from the Talmud. Does that thief know that God is? Does he know that God is real? Yes or no? Don't be shy. Does he know that God is real? Apparently he does, because he's praying to God. But yet he's about to go and steal, because his knowledge of God doesn't impact him. There's me and my relationship with God, and then there's God. So just because we know God, it doesn't mean that it affects us. Because, and by the way, that's by design. God wants us to be able to have free choice. And even the work that we're putting in here to bring the transcendent consciousness of God into our conscious state is also part of the design. And the reality is that as long as we're humans, until the Messianic era, we're going to, no matter how much we build a relationship with God, there's always going to be a struggle. But instead of struggling with the temptation for sin, let's struggle with how real God is to us. I can either spend the time wondering what's wrong with me that I have this temptation, or I can spend the time saying, how do I make God more real for me? And it's not the immanent dimension of God that I have to make more real for me, because that's real for me. It's the transcendent dimension of God that I have to make more real for me. I have to move myself out of the perception of reality as I see it, that the world is real, that this is the end all be all. What do they say? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. Like to move out of that state of consciousness into a state of consciousness where I recognize that there's something bigger. Does this make sense?
Question I have is God's transcendence being present in this world conditional? And I ask because, for example, to draw Shekinah into our realm, that is done in part by observance of mitzvahs. So is this the same thing here where in theory, if we were not to do that, it would be missing? Or is this does this function differently from that in that it's always here no matter what?
Great question. Great question. So I want to challenge you to answer it. I want to challenge you to answer it. Think about this, thinking about God as being all-powerful and infinite. Can we say that God tempers his revelation?
Concealment.
So then where does concealment live? Is that God is God being concealed upon, or is God creating the ability for us to think independently?
Isn't the concealment just a function of Atzilus, like it's supposed to be that way?
Okay, but when we say it's supposed to be that way, again, think about yourself in God's shoes. You're hanging out with God, and you see Atzilus, and you see all creation, you see all existence. Is God concealed from that? Is God hidden in that creation? I see you shaking your head no. It's okay. You got the right answer.
Isn't it different degrees of hiddenness based on where in the state of Joshua you are?
But to whom is it hidden? Okay. So it's a function. God sets the stage for us to have different levels, different frequencies of divine consciousness. But nothing gets changed about God. God is the same infinite God, no matter when I put on clothing, I am actually hiding myself. When I go into my house and lock the door, I'm actually hiding myself. But God, that doesn't work for God, because God is infinite. Nothing can hide on God. It's like saying your body can't hide on your body, because your body is the essence of who you are, and you can't hide your body. And there's nothing outside of God that could possibly hide God, right? Clothing is outside of us, so we put it on. It hides us. But there's nothing outside of God. Everything is God. Everything is divine. So just because God created a structure of Seder Hishtalshelus, of this devolution, the result of that is not that God is any more hidden. It's that the creations that God creates in their own consciousness are hidden. They don't see God.
So it functions differently from Shekinah in that can be withdrawn, transcendent that dimension of God.
Shekhinah itself is the function of God showing up in a way that he allows himself to be concealed. It's not that God is concealed. It's that he allows himself to be concealed in our consciousness. And again, I think I want to say a proof of this, but it is a proof of this, at least intellectually, we could understand that if we were to change the frequency, okay, I'm going to venture into a field that is very popular today, psychedelics, right? I don't know if anybody's done it here or not. You don't have to divulge that. But what happens, and really, come on in. what happens when somebody goes into that space? Their perception of reality changes. The very same reality that in their conscious state they see one way, they see it differently. Did anything change about the reality around them? Nothing changed, but their perception of it changed. I'll give you another very real example. As we study Torah, as we study Jewish theology, as we study more of these fundamental teachings, we can use the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov about divine providence. The same experiences that you have in life become different. They're changed. Whereas before you didn't see God in them, now you start seeing the hand of God in them. Did God change? God didn't change at all. We changed. I remember, so in yeshiva we study this stuff, right? We study the books, but that's the laboratory. But real life is lived outside of the yeshiva. So you got to take all these principles, you got to apply them in real time. So I remember, this is 1998, because I know which house I lived in at the time that this event occurred, because we only lived there for a year. Our washing machine broke. And my perception of managing personal finances was very different back then. I didn't really have a lot of experience to realize like a dead washing machine is okay. You can figure this out. It was very overwhelming for me. Like, where am I going to come up with whatever it cost back then, the couple $100 to replace the washing machine? And I remember being very, very agitated about it. What I was agitated about was the fact that I understood that the hand of God was present. And yet my body was reacting to the circumstances with a lot of anxiety. And I had a really hard time with that. Like, wait, am I real? Are these teachings real, or are they only meant to be studied in the books? And I had to work through that to come to realize, like, washing machines only break if it's part of the master plan. That's trivial in the scheme of things, but everything that goes on is part of the master plan. So when you encounter blessing, it's part of the master plan. You go to the airport and your flight gets canceled, it's part of the master plan. God forbid somebody gets ill, it's part of the master plan. You're struggling with a child, it's part of the master plan. Struggling in a relationship, it's part of the master plan. You get more money, you have less money, you have better health, less health. It's all part of the divine plan. Our job is to bring into those experiences a greater divine consciousness, to recognize that that's what's going on here. And then when we do that, then we're able to ask the next question. So what am I supposed to do with this situation? Right? If it's just chance, then it's chance. You got to go fend on your own. But if God is part of the equation, then there's something to do there. There's purpose there. Sometimes we can know the purpose, sometimes we can't. But at least we move out of the space of anxiety into a place of, okay, God's working here, right? So, and the more we do that, the more we understand, first of all, the principles of divine providence, right? There's a lot of information, there's a lot of Torah teaching. The Rebbe analyzes the principles of the Baal Shem Tov at length. What does this mean, divine providence? Does it mean divine providence and everything? And what does God control? What does God not control? I'm gonna move over a little bit. What does God control? Where do we have choice? Where do we not have choice? But the more you invest in that, what begins to happen is your own experience of life changes. You begin to experience the things in your world in a different light. Did anything change about God's presence in the reality around us? No. It's exactly the same. The only distinction is how much we are aware of God's presence there. And by the way, when we invest ourselves and then we stop investing ourselves, the person loses the consciousness, because you have to constantly cultivate that relationship. So all that to answer your question. Now, but the Alter Rebbe is telling us something very powerful here, and actually your question kind of sets the stage for that. And that is that through the study of Torah, through prayer, through acts of kindness and mitzvahs, we actually bring the higher consciousness of the divine through the divine channels into our experience. What does that mean? That we're channeling that divine energy into our experience. We're creating a stronger connection. So you can see it in two ways. You can see it saying God is sending a new flow. Or you can say we are experiencing the flow that's already there. So even though it's framed in language that when we do a mitzvah, we funnel the energy through the channel, the energy is always there. It's like in a loving relationship, when a spouse does for their beloved, they bring out the sense of love that the other one has for them. It's always there, but they bring out that sense into their consciousness, into their experience. And the parallel is not a great one because humans do have the ability to hold back that love. But to some extent, it's a parallel. Good? V'nasa v'nimshach b'china zu ayidei hamshachas hamitzvos lebechinas aretz. 24. And through fulfilling the commandments, we draw down into our faith, which is known as eretz, which is known as land, right? As we said earlier, heaven represents the spiritual, land represents the physical reality, that which is close to us, that which we have access to, the level of knowledge. But we draw down into the level of knowledge, hibechinas amuna, the transcendent dimension, the level of faith. And this faith is called a land flowing with milk and honey. Why is it called flowing with milk and honey? So again, land represents the space of knowledge. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad represents the idea of drawing down the transcendent dimension of God into the place of knowledge, the place of God that we usually refer to as faith, to make that more real for us. That land is called the land of flowing with milk and honey because the result of bringing this higher faith into the place of our knowledge, the place of our consciousness, produces honey and milk and honey. What is milk? Chalav, hu bechinas hagdalas hameichin. So when we think of milk, the first thing we think about is mother's milk. And what does mother's milk do for the child? It causes the child to grow. Children are emotional beings. The intellectual dimension of a human being evolves later on. The early stages of a human being is all about emotion. So emotions are nurtured and grow from milk. Shetigdal, and what is the emotion that we're talking about here? Shetigdal ha'ava musuteres belev v'seitze me'ahelam elagilui. To grow the love that is concealed within the heart, and that it should move out from a place of concealment into a place of revelation. Right? When we bring, using our analogy of the thief standing outside praying to God, if this thief were to take the time to pray and to meditate on the dimension of God that's transcendent, that dimension of God is not something abstract, but it's very real, to recognize that the inability to see that is a function of our limitation, not a function of God. In other words, that God is very real here. What's the result of that? The thief's love for God, that otherwise would be more concealed, becomes more revealed. And then the thief says, "Oh no, I don't want to do this. God's very real right here. I don't want to steal. I don't want to do something that's in violation of God's will." So the process of prayer allows for us to draw down the transcendent dimension into a place of knowledge, into a place of awareness, into a place of feeling, so that the love that is inherent within each of us becomes manifest. It doesn't remain concealed. It becomes expressed to the point that it actually impacts us and affects us. Let's skip the parentheses for a second, because we're on a flow here. Udavash, what is honey? So that's the land flowing with milk, and now honey, hu bechinas mesikas v'tainuk. Honey represents sweetness and pleasure, enjoyment. Like the verse says, then you will have enjoyment in Havaya or on Havaya, from the trend. The verses are very intentional when they use a different name of God. When it says, then you will derive enjoyment from Havaya, you will derive enjoyment from the transcendent dimension of God, which, as we mentioned, this is the encompassing light of God. How so? The Hainu, that is Kasher Yizbainen. To your point, when we contemplate that I am God and I don't change, I have not changed, and I am He, the same before the world was created and after the world was created. And it's only a ray of God's light that's on the heavens and earth. V'im kol zeh, right? Notwithstanding that all of this world comes into being from a concealment and a ray of God's light, nonetheless, God lifted up the glory of His people, and He chose the Jewish people. Meaning, the mitzvah that I'm about to do, God is gifting that to me. Think about that. Think about, trying to think of a good parallel. There was somebody who called me to a meeting. People don't usually call me to a meeting. But this person is a very influential person who I have a relationship with. And his secretary called me, said, so-and-so wants to meet with you. And I said, what's the nature of this meeting? And she says, he didn't say. Okay, but I'm going to the meeting. Why? Because I feel privileged that I've been invited to this meeting. Because this is an important person. I feel privileged, right? Think about that, who that might be in your world. It could be a grandparent, it could be an influential politician. Not that we like any of them, but whatever. Somebody important in your life that calls you up, right? I mean, okay, let's use the politician actually for a second. If you got a call, I don't care whether you like the current or past presidents, doesn't make a difference. You get a call, the White House wants to see you. Oh, okay, I'm going. I'm going. I don't know what this is about, but I'm going, right? Me? I've been called. Now think about it from God, as it relates to in a divine way, right? God is infinite. And God, in His infiniteness, through merely a ray of His light, created this magnificent universe. Think about it. We're nothing in the scheme of this universe. Right? Remember, we're processing all of this information as we're davening, as we're praying, right? We're processing this contemplation. We're nothing in the scheme of the physical universe, let alone in the scheme of the spiritual universe, let alone in the scheme of God's infinite ability. And yet, what did God want from all of this? That in this moment, I should put on tefillin. This moment, I should light Shabbos candles. This moment, I should put a mezuzah on my door. This moment, I should deal honestly. Wow. God calls me in this moment to do a mitzvah. Wow. I mean, that's what greater enjoyment can there be? So if God's abstract, okay, so yeah, I'll do the mitzvah. I'll do it obediently. Maybe. Sometimes I'll steal and pray to God before I steal, right? But God's abstract. But if I bring that abstract dimension of God into my consciousness, then I say, wow, God gave me an opportunity, picked me. There's a passage in the Rebbe's book, Hayom Yom, he says that a person needs to think how great God is and how small they are and the privilege that we have to be able to serve God. So where do I get my enjoyment from? Where do I get my real enjoyment from? Then I will derive enjoyment and pleasure from Havaya, from the transcendent dimension of God I'm able to derive pleasure because I understand that God has given me this opportunity. This infinite God that is unchanged found me to be worthy to be able to serve him. It's mind-blowing. As he says at the bottom of the page, if that's the case, one's heart will rejoice and exult al Hashem mamish, literally on God, on this opportunity to be able to experience and connect with this higher dimension of God. And this is the meaning of the verse, that a righteous person lives through his faith. It means that through this higher dimension of God, a righteous person lives. They're alive. Milashon tainug, from an expression of pleasure. They're alive with their faith. They're energized by their faith. You think the righteous person doesn't also have a consciousness of self? They do. But where do they derive their pleasure? From the higher consciousness. They get excited about the ability to serve God because they understand that in the act of serving God, they're connecting with the higher dimension of God, and they make that real for themselves. You don't have to be a tzaddik in order to do that. Each of us have the ability to awaken within ourselves a love and an excitement in the service of God. Pikuach nefesh, and as he translates here, the expansion of the soul. Does this make sense?
I think I might have it either backwards or off a little bit. I was trying to set up a framework. Milk and honey. Milk relates to appreciating God's immanence, his inherent, his relationship to the world that he created. That's the milk part. And then I'm hearing here that honey is talking about developing in one's consciousness an appreciation of God as the surrounding, the separate, the all-powerful. Is that a correct parallel? Milk is the God as he created the world and hears in it, and honey is the God that we can't even.
No, I think they're actually very intertwined, and they're both about the higher dimension of God being experienced by the person, but it's focusing on two different elements of that. The first element of milk represents the activation of the inherent love that we have for God that does not necessarily get expressed in the immanent experience of God. It's hard to get excited about a God that you don't see. Like I said, we can be obedient, we can be very religious, and we can do all the right stuff because we know that God is real. I know God is real. I don't have to be convinced of that. And God is real enough for me that I'm going to generally do what God wants. But am I going to get excited about it? I'm not going to get excited about it. I mean, maybe I'll get a little excited, but I'm not going to get super excited. Why? Because I'm also present. God's present and I'm present. And I've got my own interests and God has his interests. And sometimes it's a competition. Is God's interest going to win out or not? So I'll do it. And sometimes I have a good time with it and sometimes I don't, right? Think about one of the commandments that are what we call a chok, a decree, right? That have no rational reason for it. Can you get excited about not mixing wool and linen in your clothing?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I have an opportunity not to mix wool and linen in my garment. Like, it's hard to get excited about that. But you'll do it. You'll do it. You're going to get excited about it. Even a mitzvah that perhaps you can find more joy in, put a mezuzah on the door. You're gonna get excited. You're gonna dance when you put that mezuzah up. You do it. It's good. Put the mezuzah on the door. Why? Because I want to go somewhere now. Okay, I did it. I got to figure out the nail and screw. How am I going to get it into the wall? I'm going to do it, and I'll do it positively. But I don't get excited about it. When I pause and I say, "Wow, this transcendent God gives me the opportunity to serve him," the inner dimension of love that I have inside of me becomes manifest. And when I love someone, I'm much more excited to do what they want. Perhaps that aligns with the passion dimension of what we spoke about, the sacrifices. But it's a revealing within ourselves the love that is inherent within us to reveal within ourselves on this higher level, not just on a knowledge level, but on a faith level, to bring that into our experience. And then the next layer of that is actually enjoying it. And that's the honey. Not only do I bring the love for God out of me, meaning into a revealed way within my experience, but I actually also enjoy the doing of the mitzvah. In other words, I think we have a tendency to think about it, a land flowing with milk and honey, that there's one and two. There's two separate things here. It's one experience. Through bringing the transcendent dimension of God into our experience, we bring out the hidden love that's within us. And as a result of that, we experience enjoyment and pleasure in the service of God. Is that helpful?
Mhm.
You look like you're itching to ask a question.
Yeah, I got two actually.
Fire away.
Okay, number one, page 22. Hard to explain my ignorance. But how does the seven heavens come about? And where is that from? What is it all about? Page 22. You know what I mean?
I'm familiar with the concept. Oh, okay, yeah. So it's brought down in the Medrash that God descended through seven heavens, whatever those mean. I don't know what they mean. It's some spiritual dimension. It actually speaks to the idea of concealment, right? Each heaven is another layer of concealment until God manifested in the earth. So when it says the word echad, the aleph represents the one God as he's manifest in the eight, which is the seven heavens on the earth, and Daled, the four directions of the universe.
The other one, I've been watching a little bit of things on YouTube. And
That's mistake number one. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah. At least it's not for I mean,
That's true.
I don't know if you know this guy.
What's his name?
Why? Let me just look. Okay, turn it and make it bigger.
I think I know who he is.
Yeah. At least he goes by Mahon, Shiloh or Shiloh.
That's the name of the institution.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what his.
What did he say that rankled you?
Oh, yeah. He's talking about putting down Hasidim.
He's putting down Hasidim.
Yeah.
All right.
He's what he referred to as one incident where he was talking to a person who was a son. Okay. And the fellow reportedly tells this guy that the Hasidic movement is all this I forget what I said exactly, but it's kind of BS. It's just the whole magical stuff, and that the fellow who's a Hasidic told him that they already knew who the Mashiach, okay? And he refers to the Rebbe, the Mashiach. And they're still alive, yeah. And it really hurt me because my response to being with you and God and Catholic movement, I guess in my life, it was good. I find it very positive, helpful, and very informative. This guy
Has a different attitude. Yeah.
he was the one that came into contact with, in terms of, in a sense, coming back to Judaism. I don't know that. So I just wondered.
So first of all, I would tell you, trust yourself.
What?
First thing I would say is trust yourself.
Yeah.
And every good thing in the world has an opposite energy that tries to challenge it. And the proof is in the pudding. He's not the first one. It goes back all the way to the times of the Baal Shem Tov, where there were antagonists to the work that we do. For the most part, people are not preoccupied with that anymore. So I wouldn't give it too much credence, and stay off of YouTube. Yeah, it's not. Let's spend our energy in the positive things. Good. All right. Any other questions before we go on? It should quiet down there in a minute. Everybody's going downstairs. Okay. So page 26. So one of the blessings that we say after we eat food is Borei Nefashos Rabos. Blessed are you, Hashem, who creates numerous souls, the Chesroinon, and their needs. Al kol mashabarasa, for all that you have created, lahachayes behem nefesh kochai baruch elamim, to give life, to give enjoyment through them to the soul of every living thing. So what does it mean that God created numerous souls and their needs? Shepirish chesroinam, the meaning of the word their needs, davar hachaser la'adam lekim chayusay, the things that are necessary, that are lacking for a person for the necessity of their life, for their existence. So there are things that God creates for us that we can't live without. But then it says, not only did God create numerous souls, and not only did God create their needs, the things that we can't live without, in addition to that, God also created enjoyment for them so that people can enjoy life. Building on the prior passage that a tzaddik lives, he's alive through his faith. And so it is when we say, he's using that as a parallel, so too it is when we say that the righteous live with their faith. It means they're alive with their faith. Was the story, guy sitting on the operating table, an old Jew, the surgeon comes in and says, sir, are you comfortable? He says, make a living, right? Or there's the other one, he says, what does he say? He says, it looks like you make a good living. He says, you call this living? Right? So what does it mean to be, what does it mean to live? I had a teacher in yeshiva who was, he had a very unique way of analyzing the Talmud. So sometimes he would try to make the point, and he'd say, are you alive because you're not dead? Are you only alive because you're not dead? In other words, you haven't yet been hit by a car, so therefore you're alive. Does that mean that you're alive? Or you're just not dead? What does it mean to be alive? So this is what this prayer is saying. And the passage, the tzaddik b'emunaseh yichya, the tzaddik, the righteous, lives by his faith, means he's alive with his faith. Life is worth living. He's excited about life. God not only creates our soul, not only does he create our needs, meaning the needs that allow for us to be alive, but God also provides the ability for us to be alive in this world, to enjoy life. What is real joy? Doesn't hurt to have a nice car and a nice house, but real joy is when our soul is at peace. Our soul feels aligned with our body. When does our soul feel aligned with our body? When we're putting up a mezuzah and we feel that this act of putting up the mezuzah is an opportunity for us to connect with God. That's what it means to be alive. Me'roiv kol, that God gives us everything, abundance. Like the verse says, Mili b'shamayim v'imcha lechafatzti, who do I have in heavens? And besides for you, Hashem, I do not want anything else on earth. In other words, what do I want in this world? I want God. Now, again, I want to qualify this because the reality is that we are finite human beings. And we're going to always have a limitation that our bodies have their own interests. And to be a tzaddik, according to the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, to be a tzaddik is a gift that God gives to unique individuals. It's not something most of us will ever attain. So the book of Tanya is called the Sefer Shel Beinunim. It's the book of the ordinary person. It's not the book of the wicked. It's not the book of the righteous. It's the book of the average person. And the Alter Rebbe tells us in Tanya, and he tells us here, that the average person has the ability to activate within themselves this higher level of faith, to bring it into a state of consciousness where we can be alive with it. We can enjoy life. It's not easy. It's a lot of work. We have to put aside our ego. We have to pray. We have to educate our body. We have to bring our body into the experience of divine service. But the ability is there. We have that ability to move ourselves into this place where we are in touch with the deeper dimension, at least on occasion, at least before we do a mitzvah, at least in moments of Jewish joy. This makes sense? Speaking of, so two things. Today is the first day of Rosh Chodesh Elul, which means it's the 30th day of the month of Menachem Av. And beginning today until Yom Kippur, we have 40 days. There are 40 days, including today, through Yom Kippur. And these are the 40 days that Moses went up on the mountain and prayed for forgiveness for the Jewish people after the sin of the golden calf, finally attaining atonement on Yom Kippur. And there are studies, and the Rebbe speaks about this, there are studies that we can change behavior if we adopt a practice consistently for 40 days. So if there's a behavior that you want to change, an attitude, if you want to bring the transcendent faith into a state of knowledge, if over the next 40 days you put the effort in every single day, you can move yourself into a different place. Which is also why today we begin to sound the shofar. The official sounding of the shofar starts tomorrow. But today, the expression is we begin to practice to sound the shofar. So I'm going to blow the shofar in a minute. I also want to mention that the next 2 Sundays, I am out of town, related to 2 weddings. One, my daughter's, and one, a friend. My daughter's getting married here, but we're going for the Sheva Brachas to Florida, where her Chatan's family is from. And next Sunday, I'll be in New York for a wedding. I am trying to find a particular teacher who I would like them to come and teach next Sunday and the following Sunday, the mystical insight into Rosh Hashanah and to Yom Kippur. Okay, so stay tuned for the text. We'll let you know. That's a story. Any questions? No. We also have a bunch of events coming up that I'd love to see you at. We have Shabbat 250 on September 12th. Signed up. Awesome. So there's it's going to be outdoors on the Beltline. So Unity Shabbat. Please sign up. It's going to be at least 250 people there. We're also hoping for about 100 young adults. So it should be quite the in-town event. We have 2 songwriting classes in preparation for the high holidays with the Chazan that's going to be leading services. He's a fantastic musician. It'll be a fun, different type of event. And then, of course, we have high holidays coming up. So stay tuned. And I'll share one last thing. You should get an email about this week. We're launching a new initiative called the Scholar Society. Scholar Society is for $500. You get access to all of the JLI classes this year. And there are 4 this year, including a summer class. Plus, you get 2 free events and a discount on all other events, all other adult education events. VIP access to the pre-events with featured speakers, plus, to top it all off, if you sign up today, we're going to give you a $500 voucher for the JLI Land and Spirit trip to Israel in March. So it's something around the $1,200 value for only $500. And you get to belong to the Scholar Society. Oh, and you get a branded gift. So stay tuned. Okay, let's blow the shofar. B'nai Tova.